The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, midweek editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We're presented by Cornhead Lager. Numbers to dial up. Get in today on Hail Varsity Radio. 489-1240, 489-1240, or toll free where you hear us across the Hail Varsity Radio Network. 1-800-825-5865. Can email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. More than a couple of emails to get to from the last couple of days. That has been neglected by me. There's folks still chiming in and some thoughts on Wisconsin. We'll get there. Can watch the show. You're invited to do that and do so on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Check that out. Subscribe to it. Also, the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. So give that a follow. Find Elijah on Twitter at Herbalessence. Find me, Chris Schmidt, at Schmidt_radio. We have folks jumping in the stream already. Can do that in a couple of different ways, Facebook, Twitter, or the YouTube channel. Dion is first in line. Roll call continues. Anonymous is in. Dion letting us know that doesn't sound like Double H isn't going to play Saturday, I think, with a high ankle sprain.
I don't think he's playing the rest of the year.
No, I think
except maybe a bowl game.
Well, you got to get there. You got to get there first.
If you get to a bowl game under Purdy, I think he then takes the reins. Exactly.
He takes the reins, and if Harburg gets healthy, then maybe it's H-back time for him. And hey, he's a hell of a good athlete. Why not? So we'll get into plenty of thoughts on Nebraska-Wisconsin, some things to dive into with the college football playoff that's, interesting right now. Are you worried about Tony White one and done in Lincoln? We can open that kettle of worms. You feel bad, and I know there's not any Iowa love within a lot of our listening audience. That said, Cooper DeJean is an incredible ball player. He is out for Iowa. He is out through at least the bowl game. That's what Scott Docterman's reporting. It's unofficial, but Scott's juiced in for sure. Braun getting the nod at Northwestern. Kudos to him. That's some Big Ten news. And you look at that Iowa-Illinois game, and we'll talk to Mike Babcock here in about 15 minutes. Get Babber's take on Saturday. And the West race in hour two. Evan Bland will join us. We'll dive in to a Jock Doc with Deshaun Watson. 489-1240 to get in. But it's interesting just taking the temperature of the Nebraska fan base right now as we're into the middle of November, and really paying attention to the Wisconsin fan base, specifically our chat with Barry Alvarez yesterday. And, it's how he said it with you're used to winning, right? And Nebraska's not had a winning season in too long, and Rule and company are trying to change that. The kids down at the stadium are trying to change that. And Wisconsin, though, was a program that whacked Paul Chryst early. They got in the Luke Fickell sweepstakes. Fickell did a great job at Cincinnati, did an amazing job at Ohio State, did a wonderful job the year he was interim back in 2011. And he comes in, and he's got to liven up what Wisconsin is on offense. And you've seen those transitions not only take time, but take their toll. They have taken their toll on Bucky, on their fan base. And, at worst, even if you had a bad Big Ten record, Wisconsin would be a 7-5 squad, and then they'd typically bounce back. And that is difficult to go away from what has been working, or at least has been moderately successful, as they were the West favorite despite new coaches, new system, and your air rating in Wisconsin versus the old ground and pound. You've got an injured back in Braylon Allen that's incredible. And it's not that Wisconsin hasn't run the football or flipped it to 90-10 pass, but they've become a pass first. They've always been a pro-style offense, but their bread and butter was I formation or the pin and pull, very big athletic linemen, and you get an insane running game, and they have worn you out and beaten you down by the fourth quarter on top of just an incredible defense time after time. Mm-hmm. Well, all that's been problematic. And I just wonder where each fan base's morale is at. You know, you listen to Wisconsin fans, they want the season done, over, get us a quarterback. And Mordecai's good. He's just not been healthy. But make these growing pains stop. Get good on offense, be what you are on defense, and move forward. So Wisconsin's had to modernize at the expense of what they've been good enough to get bowling at, or at least, worst case, be in that West contention all the way through November. Everybody's in contention, it feels like, for the West right now. But Nebraska right now, morale-wise, you felt good after Illinois. Wisconsin felt good after Illinois. Okay. After that Iowa loss, they go pull off an 18-point comeback on the road at Illinois against the old pig farmer, their old head coach.
And I'm sure their fans looked and went, that's what the passing attack does.
Sure, and it brought them back. And it's funny that we thought that moment in time this season that turned things around was the Illinois win by both squads. And I believe it was for Nebraska to at least be in the discussion about getting to 6. The last 2 weeks have taken a step back with that confidence level if you're a Nebraska fan. But the goal line stand, the double-digit win despite being an underdog against Illinois, that was a pretty big statement after Michigan hammered you. The win by Wisconsin at Illinois, what did they do? They followed up with 3 losses. And not just 3 losses, but Indiana just clubbed them. And then Northwestern came in and said, are you done with that? Thank you, Indiana. I will take said tire iron and go to town on Wisconsin again. So, man, you've got 2 fan bases. I think Nebraska's in a healthier spot, but they're still a little skeptical and a little disappointed about the last 2 weeks. It's not doable Saturday night for Nebraska, but you just don't have much confidence in the offense.
But on the flip side, you turn it around and Wisconsin fans, they got to be even more disappointed than Husker fans in this season. Like you talk about, has this season been fun for Husker fans? That was our topic of discussion yesterday. It has not been fun for Wisconsin fans because I said it preseason, and I'm going to stick with my guns here. Wisconsin has, or at least had, I know they dealt with some injuries this year, but they came into this season with enough talent to go win the Big Ten West. Pretty easily.
Very fair. It's just how did the transition work?
And it was terrible. That has been, especially offensively, with the pieces that they have. Nebraska fans have been frustrated with Marcus Satterfield. Wisconsin has had arguably coaching malpractice as well with their offense too, with the way they've tried to flip things. They do not have the pieces to run the offense that Phil Longo wants to run. And if they tried to ease into this air raid, what?
They went and got Mordecai, so at least they've got a pass-first quarterback.
But the thing was they didn't go from, well, we've been throwing the ball 15 to 20 times a game for the past 5 years, so let's maybe go to 20 to 25 this year.
No, they went
jumped
from
up
small to large.
To 35 passing attempts a game. Not every single game. They're not
the
Maryland just yet.
Right? The receivers are the problem.
Receivers are the problem, and what the heck is going on?
Let there be light.
We're getting power surges in here. But you look at Wisconsin, they had Braylon Allen on their roster.
We came back.
They had a road grading offensive line still, and they didn't do it. As the lights go back off in the studio, this is getting spooky. We're past Halloween. I'm throwing them off my point, but let me get back to my point. Mm-hmm. The point being that Braylon Allen wasn't even the starting running back for Wisconsin this year. They had Ches Malusi. He was a Clemson transfer. He was their solidly second string running back last season, but he fits the air raid, the offensive Phil Longish a little better, so he's the starting running back until he, I think, breaks his ankle in a game earlier this fall. I think it was against Purdue, actually. And Braylon Allen has to step into that role. And instead of changing the offense and saying, you know what, we still have Braylon Allen, let's go back to maybe a 50-50 split. They've stuck with this 65-35 split between pass and run, Wisconsin has gone fully air it out. They don't have their wide receivers for it. Their running backs are not the pass-catching options that you'd like them to be. Wisconsin, I think, had a path to the Big Ten West if they could have slowly made the transition to what Phil Longo wanted to do, but they jumped headfirst into this air raid style of offense, and it has not worked for them. And that even surprised me because I said it preseason, Luke Fickell's a good coach. I think Phil Longo is a good coach. I think they're going to understand the pieces that they have and understand that the most important thing you can do in year one is win.
You know what it's done? It's killed their defense.
Yeah, because, it's looked like Nebraska the past couple years. They're not winning time of possession anymore like they used to. Their defense has been on the field a hell of a lot, and it has simply looked like that staff, Fickell, Longo, all the way top to bottom, has not prioritized winning in year one. It's been, let's get our system in place, and the pieces will come down the road. You had a winning roster this year, and Wisconsin has chosen to, instead of build a team and a core identity in year one that fits the identity of their team, they have said, you know what? Square peg, round hole has been a topic with Nebraska this year. They have gone ultimate square peg, round hole with their offense. They don't have the pieces to run the offense that they want to run, and they're saying, screw it, we're going to do it anyway. And you've seen the result. It's 3 straight losses. It's 5-5 for this Wisconsin team, and I don't think that their offense is going to do much against Nebraska either. Now, will Nebraska's offense shoot themselves in the foot more than Wisconsin on Saturday? We're going to find out.
It's up to the black shirts.
But you talk about the frustration with Nebraska's offense this year. Wisconsin fans have even more of a bone to pick with their offense because they have the pieces to go in offensively. Nebraska, I'm not so sure that they can put together a high-flying offense the way Marcus Satterfield wants it to be, an offense. And it's funny I say high-flying in the Big Ten West. That's 25 points a game. Wisconsin
21.
Wisconsin wants to put up an offense that puts up 30 points a game, but they have an offense that right now is built for ball control. It's built for running the football. It's built for 35 minutes to 40 minutes of time of possession. Put 21 points on the board, and that's going to be enough to win the football game. That's the pieces that they have, but that's not the offense that they're trying to run.
Well, and you nailed it. It's, you adjust to us, Wisconsin offensive pieces, and no, we're not going to adjust to you. Rule, his take was we're going to win now or try and win now, but we're also going to build for later. And we had Anonymous's comment up there. You'd think that Harburg would have progressed more with 1 year under the cigar chomper and another with Whipple. He's talking about Verduzco telling him to stay out of the QB room and just watch from the sideline. You know what? I think what Harburg was asked to do when he came in and how they kind of tailored the offense to him, I think he had his moments. And the reason Nebraska was able to rip off so many wins was because of his legs, his toughness, his athleticism, and as limited as he is as a college passer, and that's not his fault. It's his reality because of the cigar chomper and whip. Not even, how many reps has the kid got since he's been here? Like the most he's played has probably been this year, let alone the most he's practiced. So I'm not writing him off completely. I'm not an idiot to the fact that there's turnover problems, and there's probably a confidence issue right now because of what's different, and that's that defenses have adjusted to him, and you're not seeing the field. He's a guy that's been in college a while, but when it comes to running an offense and getting these concepts down and being comfortable with them and playing fast but having it slow down where you can make your reads, he isn't there yet. And a lot of kids at his point in his career aren't there yet when they've not played a lot of college football. So from a progression standpoint, he came in and Nebraska's 5-3 under him. It's better than the alternative. And now we turn to Pretty and see if Chubba is going to be the guy, and can Nebraska, have him manage, have him make some plays, and ultimately can the run game step up? But we're talking morale, and Wisconsin right now is formidable as Camp Randall is. And I think it's going to be about 38 degrees Saturday night. They always get up for Nebraska, but right now, man, they're just to a Wisconsin fan, they're just waiting for the season to get done to point out what you've hit on, and that's just that they've kind of blown what opportunity they had. It's very interesting, and we'll get Babber's take on this with the West race here coming up shortly, but it ain't over for a lot of teams in the West. There's still some contention to talk about for a Wisconsin. four in Nebraska, four in Northwestern, four in Illinois. And I think Minnesota's in a tough spot. I really think Purdue's in a tough spot. And Iowa's right there. How are they going to be without Cooper there for them? And their finish is not easy either. They got to come to Lincoln and Illinois. And Illinois sure as hell thinks they owe them one based on last year's 9-6 score fest where the Iowa defense got an interception with Illinois driving to at least tie the ball game. And that'll be an interesting ball game. I mean, Illinois could very well surprise. They had a bad November a year ago. They found some ways to win now, and that win looks really good for Nebraska, getting Wisconsin, I should say, getting Illinois when they did and handling them the manner they did. Compared to late in the year as teams get better and try and survive, but
you can Nebraska's Northwestern win as well.
Sure, no, absolutely.
Those two teams, Illinois and Northwestern, both have gotten a hell of a lot better as the year's gone on.
They found a way to survive and advance. Nebraska right now is trying to gather and get one more at minimum. We'll talk about that with Mike Babcock. Great to have you in. 489-1240 to dial us up. We'll get to more of your stream comments. Hail Varsity continues. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Radio Wednesday edition. We're presented by Cornhead Lager. We welcome in Mr. Husker Football. We say hi to Mike Babcock at MD Babs on Twitter. Get his bi-weekly newsletter. Mike B at hurrdatsports.com is where you can send that email and make it happen. And Mike will get you the historical perspective and then a preview of what's going on. Mike, been a long time since Nebraska rock and rolled at Camp Randall, the mid-'60s, I believe. Have you gotten the live chicken and some of Jobu's rum to break the hex?
No, I haven't. I've only been to Madison one time, and as I wrote in the newsletter this week, it was after the game. It was a night game, Russell Wilson game.
Yeah.
Nebraska's first Big Ten game. Going back to the car, which was parked about 20 minutes from the stadium, 15, 20 minutes, it was like streets of fire. I mean, there were trash can fires, trash cans turned over, obscenities filled the air. You had to be careful because people were drunk and you had to navigate your way down the sidewalk. It was really not a pleasant situation.
Did anybody ask you for money?
No, nobody did. I tried to look as unmoneyed as I could and just wanted to get to the car and get out of there.
Did you wear a hockey helmet and were you wearing shoulder pads? I mean, did you go fullback mode?
That would have been good. But I think several of the people that we encountered were so drunk that they didn't know really what was going on. And it wasn't like I was wearing Husker red, so.
See, I went in 2019 and really enjoyed my time. Like, parked and had to walk directly down Frat Row on the way to the game.
How'd that game work out? Was it a horrid beatdown?
It was a first half beatdown. Nebraska showed some life in the second half, but not enough. That was the J.D. Spielman long touchdown.
Yes.
If you remember that one, where Nebraska got a little hope back at that moment, and then Wisconsin's defense went on to crush it. They had a top 10 defense that year. They were really good. And maybe Wisconsin fans just didn't care at all about Nebraska. The student section didn't finally fill in until midway through the third quarter, so it's very possible. But I enjoyed my experience in Madison altogether. I thought it was a nice little town. I thought the fans were nice and a lovely drinking culture out there as well.
Not for the inaugural Big Ten showdown between the Big Reds, though, huh, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a capacity crowd that night for the game, and they were pretty fired up. I think they'd been drinking a little bit leading up to the game, and there was quite a bit of enthusiasm going there.
Babbers,
So,
what is there a college football war zone that compares to your Madison experience?
I can't really think. Colorado was never a friendly place, and I think I've said this before, but we always, when we'd run a car to drive out there, we always tried to make sure that it didn't have a Nebraska plate on it so that you were in a little bit better shape once you got into Boulder. But on a consistent basis, Boulder probably ranked right up there as far as people not being too kind to visitors, and they could recognize you whether you were wearing a red or not, I think.
See, Boulder's not too bad now once the fans dig into their halftime gummies. Becomes much more manageable after that.
Yeah. They've needed every ounce from start to finish. Mike, let's get a thought on Saturday and Nebraska's quarterback merry-go-round. What we do know about Nebraska is the offensive line and run game has been, I will say, stable. And the defense has been super high level this entire season. And you're catching a Wisconsin team, much like a Michigan State team, much like a Maryland team that's been reeling. But from a morale standpoint, that's where we started the show off. I think the morale's about as low as I've seen at Wisconsin, and that's one feather in Nebraska's cap. They still got to go do it, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the players consistently talk about in the news conferences is the culture that Coach Rule has instilled in them, the belief that he's instilled in them, and the fact that they feel like Satterfield said, the change is about to come. He feels like they're going to finally see the results here in short order, although we've only got 2 games left to see that. But I think the players have stuck with each other. I think they're on board with what is being taught, coached, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that puts Nebraska in a good place. If you could just take care of the football, you look at those NCAA statistics every week, and there's Nebraska at the top of the list in turnovers. There's Nebraska at the top of the list in fumbles lost. You just can't keep putting that kind of pressure on the defense, and you can't keep undercutting your offense by turning the ball over. And that's something that Nebraska, it's not probably going to happen overnight, but you would like to think that maybe that Nebraska can take care of the ball in Madison and have some success.
And Mike, it's interesting whenever you look at this game because it does feel like a game between two offenses that have been ineffective for slightly different reasons. For Wisconsin, it's been a case of not having the pieces to run the offense that Phil Longo and Coach Fickle. I don't know why I blanked on that one. It's Wednesday afternoon, but Coach Fickle want to run there. And as for Nebraska, it's been ineffective because of the turnovers. I want to get your thoughts here as we're now 10 games into the season. The root cause of those turnovers, we've been trying to figure it out for a long time now. Is it because of poor in-game coaching, poor play calling? Is it not having guys ready? Is it not having the pieces you want to run that offense? I guess, how different are Nebraska and Wisconsin's offensive struggles in your opinion?
I think Nebraska, the turnovers, the interceptions are a reflection of decision-making and maybe a comfort level there with the quarterbacks making those throws. The fumbles, that's got me wondering if it has anything to do with, when they do run some kind of option play, because, my mindset goes back to the good old days when Oklahoma was running the wishbone and Nebraska was running an option. And part of running the option is you're pitching it, you're moving it around, and you tend to fumble. The historic game when Nebraska won in 1978 in Memorial Stadium, Oklahoma fumbled 9 times, lost 6 of those fumbles. The final fumble at the 3-yard line with about 3 minutes to go in the game was by Billy Sims, the Heisman Trophy winner that season, the leading rusher in the nation that season. The offense kind of contributed to it because that's what you did. I don't know if Nebraska has some of that. It just befuddles me when I look at it and I see that Nebraska is 13 of 27, or is it 13 of 27 fumbles they've lost?
Yeah.
Something like that. I know they've lost 13, and Wisconsin is right behind them with 11 lost fumbles. So you got maybe 2 teams that have that tendency. But I don't know why it happens and why it continues to happen at this point in the season. And the 4 interceptions, that just was a head scratcher. I can't imagine there's ever been a time where 3 quarterbacks have played in a game and each quarterback has thrown an interception.
It's happened. And one of the last times it happened, it was Pitt v. Florida State. We thank our stream listeners for this stat on Monday. And Chubba was part of that trio.
Arizona State also did it a while back as well. They had 3 quarterbacks throw 4 interceptions. One had 2, and the other 2 each had 1 of their own too. So it's happened before.
So, Mike, do you stop calling pass plays? Is my question.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think so. I think you try to get some confidence there. That's something that you gotta be able to do. Even if you're running primarily options and running the ball, you still want to use that opportunity when the defense figures, hey, they're running the ball. That's what they're going to do. They're run. All of a sudden, you break somebody open. You got the chance for a big pass play. So you're not going to get rid of it entirely, even if you do put a heavy emphasis on the run, because you have the opportunity. That's why Nebraska's tight ends under Osmer always caught touchdown passes, because nobody was paying attention to them at some point, and they just get open, and there it was.
Mike Babcock's with us, Hail Varsity Radio at MD Babs on Twitter's where you find him. Mike, couple of minutes here, and if you were to lean, do you think Nebraska snaps out of it? And we'll dive into this a little bit later, Elijah, but the point spread has dropped from 7 now to 4.5, and in some spots 3.5, and that screams to me not Vegas's overwhelming security on Nebraska's quarterback situation, but more so maybe a Braylon Allen question mark has been answered if he's available, on top of all of Wisconsin's players post-game, right? When we talk about the morale, the juice, the gas left in the tank, are they miserable? And that's quite. That's half the number dropping.
Yeah, that's possible. Allen missed a game, and then he carried 3 times in the last game. So the question about whether how healthy is he going to be, how is he going to be ready? Mordecai threw 45 passes in the last game, completed 31 for 255 yards, and they lost. So. I think Nebraska has a chance because, but I've said this, I don't know how many times I've picked Nebraska here on Wednesdays and been wrong, 3 or 4. But I think Nebraska's in a position where could win this game, got that bowl eligibility, that 6-win thing on the line. I think Nebraska, if you could beat Wisconsin, you got a little bit of momentum. You could beat Iowa here. That game is here. Could beat Iowa 3-0, Nebraska. I figured it out. There's a way Nebraska could get into the Big Ten championship.
Do tell, because that's how you want to end the season, is with one more shot at Michigan.
Right. Well, it would require Illinois beating Iowa for one thing, and Nebraska has to win its final 2 games for another. And I don't know whether they take division. What the tiebreaker is, division wins. Record or whatever. If that were the case, Nebraska would definitely be the one. If it's head-to-head, then you have to hope that Minnesota would lose to Ohio State, because then the overall record would be Nebraska would have the better overall record if it won out.
Something tells me Ohio State gets that one.
They might. Mike,
something tells me that.
Mike will check in later on. Thanks for jumping in today.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Open phones here till 5, and Evan Bland going to be with us. Big thanks to Mike Babcock. Be sure to check out the podcast. Get a subscription to that for Hail Varsity Radio, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. You want to watch, go for it. It's the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, or can catch the rewind, the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. So we can get into the point number dropping from 7 to 4.5. Next hour, we'll spend some time on Tony White and how attractive he is to some programs looking at head coaches or defensive coordinators. 489-1240 or 800-825-5865. We've touched on the morale part. Let's get into some of the stream comments. And I like what's being asked here by our friends in the stream. Is it Saturday yet? Help me pronounce that, Elijah.
CK Cash.
CK Cash. Thank you. I need readers. That's all there is to it. Red Wine checks in. Good to hear from Red Wine. I'd be okay with Purdy handling the ball, handing it off to Sims, and giving Johnson a rest as long as Sims doesn't fumble it. That's optimistic. There is a lot of talent with Sims running the football. There just needs to be more care on taking care of the football. And, Babber's touched on the turnover issue. It's been beaten and beaten and beaten into the ground, but it's why you've lost, and you've won despite of it. And you just wonder about just the mindset of Nebraska, not only talking about turning the football over, but afraid to turn the football over, and the reality of guys might just be trying to do too much, or they just are careless. And it's a football IQ thing. And that goes to everybody who's taken a snap behind center. I'm of the opinion that, you look at Sims, and Rule touched on it, trying to go rogue or ad-lib a little too much on that quarterback counter, right? It went from bad to worse, from, all right, let me try and outrun everybody to the sideline and just do my own thing, bounce it out. And I see that with Grant too, man. And I am still of the opinion that Grant could really surprise and have a 100-yard game because he has the talent. But when he gets in there, it's just too much side to side, and there's not enough downhill. And listen, he needs guys up front to block for him. But there's just hesitation. There's just not him hitting the hole quick and downhill, if there is a hole.
And Schmidt, we've talked about it with Jeff Sims. You see the physical tools. You see the way the ball jumps out of his hand whenever he throws the football. You see the speed. At some point, you just got to realize that you got to cut your losses. And I think that's where Nebraska's at with Anthony Grant. You see the athleticism. You see the way he's willing to run through somebody. You see the top-end speed when he gets out in space. But it's a case of a guy that I think you just have to cut your losses on because you see the way Emmett Johnson grows every single game.
You don't go away from him at all.
You don't go away from Emmett Johnson. I don't think you risk it with Anthony Grant on the field because Emmett Johnson, based on what I've seen the past 3 games, has been head and shoulders better
Give him
than
more
Anthony
workload.
Grant.
Him and
Give
Fleeks.
Him more workload. And we have a thought in here from Red Wine saying they used to make a fumbler carry the ball around all week. What if we say they have to what if we say they have to not sure what he's going for. They'll get tired of picking it up though.
Yeah, maybe he's going with the program reference where you fumble in practice, you have to carry the football all around.
Hey, that's what I'm saying. What happens if it's a campus-wide call? The running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, they'll have to carry a ball around all week long, and if a student gets to knock that football out during class, between classes, whatever, they get a little prize.
Well, then it gets back to coach, and, you fumbled, you weren't securing the football. Everybody's running stadium stairs. Brian checks in on Wisconsin. A lot of finger-pointing going on in Badgertown. Big Red has had its ups and downs this season, but they still control their own destiny to make it to the bowl game. That's one thing that Tony White touched on. And Satterfield has also mentioned a few times that team building, that chemistry, that camaraderie. This could have had several earthquakes when it comes to finger pointing, right? But they truly do have one another's back. They've accepted the sudden change challenge. It's like it's a game show. And Nebraska's been ready for about every fire drill. They've not always succeeded, but more times than not, they've done a marvelous job of keeping points or touchdowns off the board. Who's on the horn?
Well, have you seen Moonbot's comment on the stream?
No.
He's got a great idea. Not 5 wide. He says everybody will be expecting the run. Pass until we hit 3 interceptions and then start running.
Well, right, because surely they're not going to go for 4 picks. 5? Nah, can't do it. They can't top last week.
Moonbot, he could be Marcus Satterfield in the stream here.
Yeah,
Pass till we hit 3 and then start running the football.
I'm sure Sat's lurking and enjoying sports radio this time of year in this state. After being in South Carolina. Yeah, I'm sure he's a big sports radio guy.
We go to the phone lines where Tim is hanging on.
Tim, thanks for hanging. Go ahead.
You bet, guys. Love the show.
Thanks,
Couple
man.
things. The fans that are being unruly in the stands grow up. The young fans who are upset about us losing. We got young red shirts out there filling in for guys that are injured. It takes time. If you're 30, 40 years old, you know how long it takes just to win half your games. If you're 40 and older, trust me, you've chewed your nails off for years to see what it takes to win championships and to win the big title. So everybody slow down, just be patient. And if we lose this week, does Jack, or if we're getting tortured, does Jack get the call the rest of the season to start getting him some game experience? Thanks for letting me get in, guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the phone call, Tim. I don't know on the Jack call, but it's a thought there. But yeah, I mean there's always drama associated, but the drama's shifted over the years from can you win the big one, can you hang on and win the whole thing, to now you're in that can you get back to a bowl game situation.
Well, and it's so simple with Nebraska this year. It just feels like a mark of progress is can you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat?
And they've been better at that.
I mean, this year I think there's among the talent on the field, if you take away stylistically, you take away momentum, all that.
I'm looking at what they've done with all their injuries. That's the hallmark to me. If we're going to talk why you should be optimistic, despite and Tim hit on it with the red shirts and the freshmen on the defensive side of the ball. Elijah, I mean they I know they've lost their last 2 with backup quarterbacks, but they won 3 straight with a backup quarterback, and then your O-line goes down, and you're playing freshman wideouts, and your top 2 to 3 running backs, at least 2 of them are gone for the year. So you are absolutely riddled on one side of the football that's had problems anyway. And I know we've been critical of Sat, and you know the comment of you can't play stupid, but you can't play scared. There's got to be a better balance with your personnel and what you're calling. In the same sense, there's been instances where it's been open with what he's called, and it's been the execution thing. We'll wind down hour 1. More comments from you, more phone calls on the way with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this first hour. Evan Bland coming up in 10 minutes. Room for you at 5:20. A Jock Doc will wind us down, 489-1240. Reminder to get buckled up. Coaches make substitutions during the game to get their best player on the field. Getting behind the wheel after drinking also demands a substitution. Impaired driving is deceptively dangerous. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Some emails to get to next hour as well. More of your stream comments. Our old friend Jeff from Boulder. Love that story about the Snitleys brokering the Boulder Peace Treaty.
Legendary.
Which it is legendary. If you're cut off from the bar, usually you don't get reserved. That's not us, and that's not even the Snitleys.
Well, that's what the whole point of the peace treaty was.
I know, but the fact is, hey, that's fine. Homeboy, sure, he's a few deep. They just got rocked by Colorado. How about beer? How about no more Jameson?
If you say no,
beer.
we'll get our lawyer involved.
Sir, would you like some of the finest Coors Colorado has to offer? Jeff chimes in. That was the best. Witnessing, we should have filmed the Boulder Peace Treaty. Went to Madtown in 2016. As he's on the stream here with his comment. YouTube is where you watch this Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Went to Madtown in 2016, watched Nebraska lose in overtime. Prior to the game, a family of Badger fans bought our group beers and wished us luck. Overall, the fans were not horrible. That's warming.
I agree with that.
Can't you see Babbers though? I mean, it's like it's apocalypse now. Babbers in a hard hat, probably a flak jacket, and he's making his way on that 20-minute trek from Camp Randall to the Babbers Mobile. And there's I mean, it's like the scene in Back to the Future 2, where Marty goes back in time, and there's Biff's Palace, the casino, and there's all these rundown joints, and there's trash can fires, and there's just hammered zombies everywhere. I can just picture Babbers with a stern look on his face, backpack, and he's just trucking. He's just getting through the noise.
He missed out. The walking through Frat Row at Wisconsin was electric. It's different than Nebraska. They're just all drinking in the front yards, which you can't do at Nebraska. And I thought it was quite enjoyable. I thought they were very receptive. I had to go back.
Were
and
there a
look through
few
my camera
option
roll.
pitches to Elijah?
No, I know. Well, here's the thing. And I checked my camera rolls, 2018, because I have a picture. There's a nice sign on one of the frats. It looks like Pike, the Pike House. I mean, we talk about welcoming. Wisconsin dads and Nebraska moms drink free.
Okay.
How receptive is that? Getting all the Husker moms in there, letting them drink for free? That's chivalrous. That's what that is.
Sure. It's one way to think about it. Mi casa, su casa. There you go. So we'll get Evan Bland's take on this whole thing Saturday night. Weekend edition, just to remind you, flex schedule-wise, we're going to be 4 to 6 live Saturday. As we'll get you ready for Nebraska-Wisconsin. Real Red Reaction follows as soon as Nebraska-Wisconsin wraps up. Roadshow Friday for us. We are up at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, 4 to 6. So if you're in La Vista, come on by, grab a brew and or a whiskey or some of that Bang Bang sauce. Hour 2 on the way with Hail Varsity Radio.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in with the Omaha World Herald, Evan Bland at Evan Bland OWH on Twitter. Evan, what's going on? Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, not much. It it feels like a late May afternoon here, except for the sunset, but doing all right.
Have you grabbed the golf clubs or no time?
Not during the season, no, not so much. And
Like,
the dead grass kind of, it kills the vibe a little bit, but no, I'm not complaining at all.
So if you're waiting for after football season, do you have any advice for December golfing?
I mean,
do it in Arizona.
Usually bring your snowshoes.
Yeah.
Keep your head down. I suppose that applies any time of year.
Yeah, don't
Hit
tap
it low, keep it out of the wind.
Well, Brian chimes in on the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Brian says if it's a hockey environment at Madison, don't forget the foil and keep the Hanson brothers close by. We were talking about, what to expect. It's a Slapshot reference. You haven't seen that? Elijah?
No.
No? Oh, man. Okay. Well, we'll get there next time.
I've seen that one scene, the end scene where they're in the office. Yeah. I think you showed me that one.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Evan, we'll get back to football. It's a bit of a comedy at quarterback. We'll transition that way. The turnovers are not a laughing matter unless you're playing Nebraska. And what are you picking up? What are you thinking here for Saturday? Any insight or projection here on if it is going to be Chubba? I know when we last heard from Rule and even sat yesterday, it was Chubba and it was Sims taking snaps and not much mention on Heinrich.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, Rule said on Monday it'd be a game day decision, and I don't see any reason why that's not going to be the case. If Heinrich Haarberg's ankle is not up to what they want it to be, so he can be an explosive runner and that dual threat that he has been, then I think that's a tough ask for him to go out there hobbled. Purdy looked good on the drive that he got there at the end. He goes 10 plays, 90 yards before the interception, and Rule said he was a little bit banged up just from the hits he took on that one drive. He hasn't had a lot of reps this year, had the groin that he's worked through and may require something, procedural after the season to address that. So, he's a little bit less than 100% health-wise. Jeff Sims is healthy, but he had 3 of those turnovers on Saturday, and you wonder how much trust he can earn back this week in practice from what we've seen, in a pretty big sample size to this point in the season. So I don't know. I mean, I truthfully, do you go with the guy who's healthy and who maybe you have to hold your breath a little bit with ball security? Do you go with somebody else who's less than 100%? I don't know. I don't know which way you go. I do think, though, whoever they go with, you have to look hard at protecting your quarterback, and by that I mean kind of maybe dying to yourself a little bit and running the ball a lot more. And maybe that's not what this staff wants to do long term. That's maybe not the path they are envisioning for contending for the Big Ten down the line or whatever it might be. But I think for these last 2 games, just considering the problems they've had holding onto the ball and how well the defense has played, whoever you put out there, put them in the best position to where they're not exposing their bodies, exposing the football, and putting so much more risk on every one of these plays.
Well, Evan, while we're talking about the quarterback position here, just off the wall, do you know which leader of this Husker team, in fact, played some quarterback in high school?
Who are you talking about?
It was Isaac Gifford, and I know that because I was the center for his first ever varsity snap at the quarterback position. We fumbled the exchange. I never got to snap the ball to him again, and the rest is history.
It was on the center on that one.
I'm not going to say whose fault it was. But, hey, the option's there. I don't think he started at quarterback by the time his senior year rolled around, but he at least got one varsity snap at quarterback, and I don't know, the guy's been a real leader for that defense, and all the offense maybe needs is a leader.
Hey, I mean, I'm a Southeast guy too, so I wouldn't hate that to give him a chance. But no, I think Marcus Satterfield made it pretty clear on Tuesday. He was asked about who do you look at beyond those 3, and he really didn't want to go there. I mean, they have a couple walk-on quarterbacks on the roster that he could have mentioned, but he was pretty clear that they were going to travel 3 to Madison, and those are their scholarship guys. Those are the guys they've invested the reps in. It's tough because they're all good guys, right? The turnovers and the struggles are not an indictment on who they are as people, their personalities, all the rest. They've been good teammates when they haven't been out there. They've been supportive. In that sense, you feel good about it, but it's been the want to and the who you are as a person. It doesn't always account for processing in the moment and good decision making when you're out there, and those sorts of things that just continue to hound them. But you're at this point now where you've got 2 games left. I think if you can start Haarberg and he gives you close to what he normally does in the run game, you've put enough into him at this point that you put him back out there, would be my opinion. But we'll see. It's not a great situation, as Matt Rule said Monday. Maybe there aren't any answers really immediately, at least not great ones that you feel good about. I think it just again comes down to how do you mitigate risk and set the game up in such a way that you're putting more weight on a defense that's shown that it's able to handle it.
Evan Bland's with us from the Omaha World Herald, Nebraska-Wisconsin, Saturday. Are you surprised at the lack of protection for this defense, and they've not gone conservative? They've let it rip, and even in some moments, it's easy to scream, be conservative with hindsight. Or is that not what Nebraska's ever going to be. And I ask that because there's been some years where, listen, you lean on your strength and you find a way to win with your strength, and you make do with another side of the unit or football that may not be up to par, and you try and work together to get it done. This team's has had each other's back, and I really respect that. That said, this defense is, I mean, they're going to have the broadest shoulders in America by the time the season's done.
Yeah, I am a little surprised that they haven't protected the defense more. And I think the last drive of the game, the interception that Nebraska throws, to me is a perfect example of that, to where, to hear Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield lay out their reasoning for that play. It was about attacking. It was about winning the game. It was about, as Matt Rule said on Monday, trying to teach guys that if you play it safe, you only get to a certain point. But, again, I think context matters so much. And in that moment, you've got a third-string quarterback who hasn't taken a lot of reps. Your defense has been a strength, but your running game offensively has been a strength more so than what your offense has been. So, you can make an argument, I think, that attacking and winning the game is running the ball on third down. Maybe you score, but if you don't, sets you up for a field goal, and you are able to rely on that defense. And I don't know why that can't fit into that lens. That's what I would be curious to kind of follow up on or explore deeper, kind of the thought process there. And it does feel like in the last couple of weeks, especially, they have been a little bit bolder with their passing game and gone away from some of the ground and pound that was a part of why they won the 3 in a row that they did. So, again, you're at this spot where long term you have a vision for what this offense wants to be. But right now, this is the personnel that you have. You have injuries. You have all the rest. You have to walk that fine line between kind of, doing what you want to do, what's natural to you as a play caller, but then also being aware in the moment what your limitations are and maybe the best thing for you to do to win. Because, if you're sending a larger message to your team in that moment, I think another pretty large message would be, hey, you win the game, you go to a bowl game, you get the practices, this program takes a step forward. So, I think those are all kind of factors in what's been a pretty, complicated discussion this week.
Evan Bland with us here from the Omaha World Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, looking forward here, the final 2 games of the season, can Nebraska get anything more from their defense? Because the turnovers are expected at this point. I was talking to my roommate last week. He asked, well, what can I expect tomorrow? I said, well, turnovers, for one. That's the main thing you can expect with this Husker offense. So with that in mind, can this Husker team get anything more out of this defense to get them over that mark, get them to that 6-win point?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. The defense is relatively healthy. They're still relatively deep. This, in theory, is the time of the year when that depth pays off, where you saved your guys a game or two's worth of snaps on their bodies by rotating as many guys as you have. So maybe you have a little bit fresher legs, that sorts of thing. But the defense, in a lot of ways, sort of is what it is. We know that it's a good run-stopping defense. We know that it's going to pressure the quarterback. We know that it's pretty good in the red zone and sort of a bend but don't break, sort of effectiveness. But that's been that last step, and sort of the bane of the existence of these black shirts has been, can you turn some of those punts into the takeaways and setting up the defense or setting up the offense into a short field, because goodness knows they need it on that side of the ball, and that's what helped them score against Maryland last week. So I think it's there, but again, we're 10 games into this thing, and so at what point is the team kind of what it is? And for a lot of teams, that would be enough. That would be more than enough. The defense is one of the great stories. I think it's certainly of Nebraska. It's one of the better stories in college football this year, the way that it's been able to bounce back and, be an anchor for this team. I think there are individual players that certainly can make those plays. Wisconsin hasn't necessarily been super prone to turning it over on offense. So we'll see how that part of it shakes out. But like, again, even if the offense could take even a marginal step forward, I think what the defense is doing it should be enough for Nebraska to be in games and to win them at the end.
Evan, are you surprised that the mess Wisconsin is, not with a transition or a new coach, but just what's perceived as some finger pointing, and some of the players have spoke out? I mean, some of them are just ready to end the year. That's the body language and tone.
It's been really interesting to listen to some of the interviews out of Madison this week from players. I mean, you're right. Like there's finger pointing. There's a lot of talk about buy-in and who's bought in and who's not, and how do you figure that out? It's not all that different from interviews that we've heard in Lincoln from past seasons when there's been transition going on. And so, like, what I think is interesting is one of the positives that if you're Nebraska, I think one thing that you can take out of this season for sure is that there is a culture being set. And, like, this is a great sort of comparison week for that, because you look at the fact that Wisconsin and Nebraska are both 5-5, 3-4 in the division. They both have first-year coaches. And on the one hand, you have all the conversation going on in Madison. And on the other hand, you've got, Nebraska guys kind of buying into what's going on, going 1-0 each week. And I haven't gotten the sense, talking to anybody, that there's a rift between the offense and the defense. And I think that can happen in a place where there's, flimsier culture or a lack of communication. So, like, I don't know that that's enough for Nebraska to win on Saturday night. I think Wisconsin is a little healthier and probably has more talent overall, top to bottom. But I do think it's a really interesting case study in how far Nebraska's come along culturally this season under Matt Rule.
Well, when you talk about that culture, I mean, it's interesting because you look at it, from the outside looking in, Wisconsin's probably got the best quarterback in the Big Ten West. They probably have the best running back in Braylon Allen, despite the fact he's had some injury concerns in recent weeks. One of the better offensive lines, and yet it just has not translated. I think that speaks to some of the internal issues at Wisconsin this year, whether it be scheme or whether it be culture.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it kind of has Bill Callahan 2004 vibes, right? Like, this is a team in Wisconsin that is undergoing some pretty radical changes from being a huddling, pound the ball sort of offense to an air raid spread, and then defensively from a 3-4 with dominant outside linebackers into more of a 3-3-5, and you throw onto the fact that program had expectations this year. If you think back to the preseason, they were the favorites from media covering the conference to win the West. And, that's looking pretty much like a long shot at this point. And, the Badgers losing 3 in a row, that does not happen a lot. So this is a team that's been used to winning. These are players, the older ones certainly, that have been used to winning. It's not happening right now. And I thought Tony White for Nebraska made a really good point this week, saying that if you don't have that off-season investment where guys really get to know each other and you go through the fire together in the off-season, then when it happens during the season, there's a lot of kind of you versus me within the team. And I think we're seeing some of that with Wisconsin this year. So, again, I think that's a credit to what Nebraska's done, and it makes for a really fascinating viewing in terms of how the Badgers are going to transition under Luke Fickell.
Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald. Follow him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Evan, enjoy Madtown. We'll check in next week. Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, guys.
All right, there he is. Good stuff from Evan Bland. Open phones next segment, 489-1240. We roll forward on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity, and we're powered by Cornhead Lager.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hail Varsity Radio, Wednesday edition. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, as Red Wine counting down the days for the portal that opens December 4th. And 19 days. As Red Wine continues, we should be tampering with every number 2 quarterback possible. I've got a list of names, and I don't know if they're available yet or not, but yep, hit that portal. And please vet and vet and vet again. And then vet some more. And then make some more phone calls. And then go watch the guys tape. Not that they didn't, but It's been a bad example of investment and no return on that with Sims between injury and then just ineffectiveness. Nothing personal. You hope if he gets a shot Saturday, it's his best performance. If you're a Nebraska fan, you just don't have a ton of faith in that right now. You have Duck that checks in on the stream and can check us out on the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube channel. We'll get to the phones in a moment. Duck says this: I guess I've changed my expectations to now we have done better than last year and hope we get a couple of quarterbacks in the season, at the end of the season. And, yeah, I mean, figure out who wants to stay and be here and keep working, get developed, and then you're going to have to add, plus what you're getting in the recruiting class.
And there's going to be quarterbacks available in the portal, as there are every single year. And that's always the question. Well, if Sims is the best you could get last year, who are you going to be able to get this year? I mean, Casey Thompson was a hit in the portal.
He was.
He wasn't elite. He's not Caleb Williams. But those quarterbacks, there's quarterbacks in the portal that are going to be good enough to get you to a bowl game, to get you to a Big Ten championship game. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, if you remember Penix was a commodity in the portal, but he wasn't the guy
you
that
weren't
he is
sure.
now.
Are you getting the Penix that was hurt at Indiana and missed and didn't follow up the COVID year where he was incredible in Indiana, made Ohio State sweat. They beat Penn State. They were right there for the division, and quite frankly, could have been in a New Year's Day 6 and weren't. And, you know, then he transfers, and Kalen DeBoer was kind of a big deal, too, as OC. Who's on the horn?
We have Jim on the line.
Jim, thanks for calling. Go for it.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to mention I'm so proud of Rule that he takes responsibility, and that's something that we haven't seen for a while, and how he's building a culture, and the guys just seem to be together. It's if you take a look at what's going on with the Wisconsin right now and what's going on with Nebraska, it'd be pretty easy to choose who you'd kind of want to stick with next year. But the guys are all hanging in there. You got a bunch of injuries. You got a ton of young guys, and they all seem to be wanting to play together. So it's very impressive to me is all I'm saying.
No, the 30,000-foot view, considering everything. Jim, thanks for the phone call, 489-1240. Look, I know we've beat up the final drive a little bit, well, the play call, but overall, I mean, for Nebraska to be in it is impressive, and the thing that's maddening is the self-infliction that still plagues this program. You take even half the turnovers away, you're talking about a, dare I say, 8-2, 7 win. You're at least at 6, and back to your quarterback point, if you make a better quarterback choice, or at least here's the deal. Like, we talk about Casey Thompson a lot, not overly, but you know, the what could have been, or all right, let's plug and play him here, and where's Nebraska at? Well, the reasoning was, all right, you want a dual threat mobile quarterback, you want a willing runner. And it's not that Casey didn't run it. It's just his forte's back there throwing the football. Well, Satterfield wants to chuck the football. But from the get-go, it was pound, and then soften him up for the fourth quarter. Be a physical running football team. And it has turned into that, but you got to lean on that and not go into the passing offense if it's a liability, or at least resist the temptation. So, you know, the other part of this is competition, and you're going to make everybody compete for a spot. No one's handed anything, and you can't preach that and then hand over the starting spot to Casey Thompson. He was not going to be available to compete for the job in the spring when Sims came in, so there was a bit of a mess, a mesh point mess there.
Well, did Sims face any competition?
I think so. I mean, I do. I think Sims probably in practice had better moments. From what I'm told, probably had some turnover moments. I mean, you saw a lot of turnovers in the spring game, right? I mean, and it's been an issue.
It may have
sure.
been competition, but I don't think it was open competition. I
don't think
you went into
I
it
don't think
saying
it was close.
This is our guy in the portal, and look at the tools that he's got. I don't think you went.
I think you could have a favorite in the race, but not have named the. I don't think anyone had it sewn up. I pray that it wasn't. All right, Casey, we need you to stick and compete. Oh wait, you're hurt, and then you go into here's the job sims.
I think as soon as Casey was gone, it was a foregone conclusion who the starting quarterback was going to be.
You weren't sure if he was going to stick or not anyway. I mean,
with Casey?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as soon as he was gone, I think that it became a foregone conclusion who your starting quarterback was.
Well, what we don't know is with Chubba's growing is because at one point Rule did mention that he was number 2 and Harburg was 3. The injury kind of bumped Chubba down to.
You talk about how little. You remember that video you have of Harburg throwing a block on Gifford during fall camp?
Yeah, he was H-backing it.
That's how not open this quarterback competition was. You had your guy, so let's have our third string guy go risk himself blocking. Now, we're going to make him an H-back this fall.
But there's a lot that's gone wrong, okay, at quarterback. Decision-making, execution, grasp of the offense, ability to manage, and there's also some bright spots with adapting to a running quarterback, some of the play action. You've seen the young wideouts make some plays for you. You've seen the offensive line get a lot better.
Oh, yeah. That's the big positive from the offense
sure.
this year.
So
the offensive line and Emmett Johnson are the two big positives from the offense this year, and you've seen some growth from those freshman wide receivers.
They've each, two of the guys have scored pretty big game-sealing touchdowns, like knockout shots with Malachi and Lloyd. So, there's been more bad or negative with the turnovers. Now, defense has bailed you out on a handful of those.
Handful.
Well,
bucketful.
It's a giant keg of turnovers. But no, I mean, you just go back and you need better efficiency at who you're going to go after, making sure they can fit, and as much of a crapshoot as it is, just be right with who you bring in versus who you send off or let go, and make sure it's a situation where you've got a backup plan if plan A don't work. They've got to be right next year at whatever the quarterback is. And if they just want a manager, fine. If you think the O-line that's coming back is going to be a real strength and they can make another leap running the football, you've got Emmett and you've got some other running back choices, then just be a downhill running football team that can hit a tight end, can hit a crossing route, can read a defense, and you can survive on that 15 to 25 pitch count throwing the football and still be a physical downhill football team.
By God, Schmidt, that sounds like Spencer Petrus's music.
No.
He's in the portal.
No.
Game manager throws the ball 15 times a game and hands it off with a downhill running game. Nebraska's found their guy.
Does Spencer have a win over Nebraska?
Yeah.
Does he?
Not last year, but 2 years ago, yeah.
Okay. So let's just get into the portal names real quick, all right? We'll get to more comments, too, on the stream. Moonbot says bring in 2 transfers and have a real quarterback battle. The other part is Kalen and bring in a top FCS guy. Here's the names, all right? And I don't know that they've declared yet if they will declare, but here are the names. Michael Pratt out of Tulane.
He's really, really good. That's one of those guys that I think might even be out of Nebraska's grasp because of the types of programs that are going to be after Michael Pratt. He's had a fantastic year.
You've got Malik Murphy, Texas, because homeboy's coming back, and then you still got Arch down there. Kienholz, thank you, is the kid out of South Dakota, though, that had Washington come in and had Ohio State, and I think Whip went after his homeboy in Massachusetts. It's already been booted from Virginia Tech. You have Jaden Mavia out of UNLV and Zane Flores. I think Zane Flores is going to go win the job at Oklahoma State. It'd be cool to have the Gretna stud back here, though. But Murphy and Kienholz, Mavia and Pratt. Here's the other part of this, right? You've got NIL. You are Nebraska. You've got some things that are working in your favor with NIL. and you've got to bite the bullet and pay a dude. I mean, you've already paid a guy here, not an exorbitant amount. It's a hell of a lot of money, but it's not what some of the other going rates have been. So be right if you're going to fork it over this time.
There's a name that you missed that's on the list there, and there's two names that are really intriguing to me. One name that's
Cam
on
Rising and Dylan Raiola?
MJ Morris from NC State.
Yeah, because Nebraska was after him. He's redshirting the rest of this year at NC State.
Likely because he's going to be entering the portal after this season.
Okay. So
that's an interesting name, and Matt Rule has some connections in the Carolinas.
Nebraska was in on a handful of these guys.
Mm-hmm. And the other name that I think is really, really intriguing is...
But you got to spend it to get it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about
the other name that's intriguing to me
falling short on the NIL.
Keenholz from Ohio State.
I think go get him, and especially if he's got a year of Ohio State tutorage under his belt.
It's worked out for a lot of other quarterbacks to
They've
go there
been
for a year.
great. Yeah,
Viewers.
Look at Stroud, for God's sake.
I mean, but there's a connection with Keenholz in Nebraska. You know what that connection is, Schmitty?
Is it Polar Bear?
Or just not? It's Jason Machacek.
Oh, yes.
Same high school. They both went to TF Riggs in Pierre, South Dakota.
You ever been through Pierre?
Yeah, I know you have.
Charming. Very charming.
Yeah, no, but they're both from Pierre, same high school. I believe they played in a state title game together.
And if you blow a tire driving through South Dakota, somebody in Pierre is going to stop by and help you fix that.
That's helpful for me.
Next time you're going east to west to the Black Hills, there you go. No, I'm excited to see what Kalen can become too. So, I think
Kalen's a great backup plan to have as a break in case of emergency. You probably keep one of your three around.
Get him tutored.
Harburg maybe, and if no one beats him out, but then you move him if you can get two portal guys.
Get me a healthy Chubba, and let's see what Saturday looks like. Let's see what Iowa looks like, and let's see what Beyond looks like. I'm not punting on any of these guys to get coached up.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center, Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. Dr. Brandon, thanks for some time today. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, guys. How y'all doing?
We're doing all right. We're doing a lot better than Deshaun Watson. Needs shoulder surgery, out for the rest of the year. He paused with the media session today with the Browns, and it's very tough. He's had knee issues. He's got a max guaranteed deal, but an MRI performed Monday revealed that Watson had a displaced fracture on the glenoid, his right shoulder. Explain that to us and correct the pronunciation.
Yeah, you bet, Chris. Nice work. Glenoid is perfect. As you think about anatomically this region, so obviously you're talking about the shoulder. The shoulder is a ball and socket joint. So on the socket side of the shoulder, that structure is actually called the glenoid. Around the glenoid is a structure called the labrum. We've had a couple of chats on here about labral tears and instability in shoulders. And so, pretty uncommon to have a fracture of the glenoid. Oftentimes when we start to see, fractures of the glenoid, which again would be like a displaced piece coming off the socket side, oftentimes we really are talking about instability typically. True glenoid fractures, obviously really high-level impact can cause a true glenoid fracture, and like a car accident would be one of those things. But obviously you're playing in the NFL, get hit by a big enough truck out there on the field that could do it. But my assumption for him would be he's probably had some subtle instability here, and then had kind of a big event here where he probably dislocated the shoulder, and that typically is enough force as that ball portion kind of slams forward and dislocates out of place. That ball slams into the socket, in addition to tearing up or lifting up that labrum that tends to break part of that front aspect of that socket off. So if you think about the socket of the glenoid, we think of it as kind of a clock face. So if you're kind of looking towards the front of that clock face, down towards the bottom, kind of between about 3 o'clock down to about 6 o'clock, that's typically where these injuries happen. And again, it's more of kind of a shearing injury as that ball portion slides forward out of place, nails part of that front edge of the glenoid, and basically fractures off a piece of that. And that's most likely what he's dealing with at this time.
He played through this the entire second half against Baltimore in Cleveland's comeback victory. It was painful, he said, but it occurred in that first half. How'd the guy get through it, still throw for 200-some yards and have a good completion percentage? That sounds pretty remarkable.
It really does, Chris. It really does. Sounds remarkable he got through that. And really, I'm assuming that the symptoms he's been having is more kind of instability type symptoms. And so, from a throwing mechanism perspective, as you try to wind up, get back into that cocking motion, that motion of going all the way back, so you're kind of rotating that wrist back towards your shoulder, elbows kind of coming out to the side. That's kind of that classic position where that ball portion wants to feel like it wants to slip forward or slip out of place. So no doubt as he was doing that, he probably felt a bit of apprehension, if you will, feeling like that ball portion might slide out. But still pretty amazing that he can do this. A lot of our athletes we talked about before, especially our throwing athletes, we always talk about kind of walking that fine line of, having just enough instability, laxity, looseness of that shoulder to allow you to throw, a certain type of velocity. But obviously you always kind of walk that fine line. If you start to cross over it, then that ball portion, the mechanics start to change, you start to slip out, and it becomes obviously more and more difficult to generate that velocity as that shoulder becomes more unstable, which again I think is a scenario where kind of he's in at this point.
He had a rotator cuff strain earlier in the season. The medical staff say there's nothing related to it. But when we talk shoulder and throwing shoulder, I mean, that's a mess to deal with rotator cuff. And then it sounds like this molehill turned into a mountain with the glenoid when you talk about repeated hits and kind of a build up to it finally collapsing.
Yeah, absolutely. You wonder what kind of connection is there. Does the rotator cuff issue show up because he already has some subtle instability? Maybe perhaps. On the flip side, did he, rehab this thing hard enough to allow that rotator cuff to recover and strengthen to the point where he has enough, kind of strength and stability to hold that shoulder in place? Obviously, you can start asking some of those questions. But in the end, unfortunately, at that level of play, the kind of force that's exerted on those folks, it could have just been a one-time deal where it knocked it out.
Deshaun Watson, our topic at Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. So let's talk procedure and recovery, Dr. Brandon. What's the timetable look like here for Watson to get back and be his old self?
Typically with these, if they're going to go and fix the glenoid, that's going to fix the instability piece on the labral side would be part of this most likely. So if you do something like that, you're looking at being in a sling with one of those pillows for about 4 to 6 weeks. Could be a little longer depending on how much kind of bony work goes into it and the stability and the fixation they feel is adequate for that. You may go a little longer than that. Total recovery time, at least the contact side of things, typically somewhere in that 4.5 to 6 month range. Obviously, he's got plenty of time to get ready for next year. I think the big question mark for these folks is, when do you let them start throwing? That's always kind of an interesting question for athletes who go through a stabilization type procedure. Is when do you let them start throwing? That number can be anywhere from 6 months up to 9 months, sometimes even further along than that, just depending on how they feel. Obviously, if there's a bony fixation piece that's here, that might delay that even a little bit further. I do think a timetable of getting him back for next year is probably reasonable, although we're already into November, and so you start thinking about fast forward that 9-10 months down the road, and we're looking at next year already. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how many throwing reps he gets kind of through the summer. But my suspicion would be that probably by at least June, July, he's probably getting some throwing reps, if not a little sooner.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday. And Dr. Brandon, last thought, about 60 seconds left. Do you have any concerns about Deshaun Watson not being able to get back to his old self following the surgery? Are there any long-term risks with a guy injuring his throwing shoulder, fracturing this bone? Do you think he will get back to his old self, or do you think there's any concerns with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors here to consider. So, one, when you go in, what are you, trying to accomplish here surgically? Well, obviously stabilization of the fracture, but also stabilization of the shoulder. In the process of doing that, having shoulder surgery, things get tighter, joints get tighter when you go in and you do surgery on these type of structures, especially in a throwing athlete. So, one, he's going to have to battle some stiffness and some tightness. Can he get through that? Potentially. Number two, he's going to have to battle that kind of the whole mechanics that go along with that. So being able to retrain your brain how to throw. And then three is that kind of that tightness, stiffness sets in. Obviously, that can change some of your velocity. And so that could be a bigger issue for him too. And then, kind of the last thing, probably the most important part here is really, how much of a risk is he at going back in terms of redeveloping this injury, taking another hit to the socket, another hit to the labrum. Can you tear through those sutures? Can you kind of redevelop instability? When you look at obviously the size of the people he's going up against and the hits that they take, that's obviously a possibility. That can happen. You think about the force that goes through that shoulder and direct contact. That can be enough to kind of overpower, whether it's screws that you put in to fix this or whether it's suture you put in to fix this. Patients can tear back through that stuff, and I've seen that happen. And so that's always another risk for him, too. Do I think he can come back? I think he'll try for it. I think it's reasonable, but I think throwing-wise, he'll probably be a little bit different next year. But hopefully as time goes along and his tissues become maybe more elastic and pliable, he can return back to a pretty high level of throwing and accuracy.
Dr. Brandon, we'll get caught up again next week. Thanks for the time.
Okay, fellas, y'all take care.
Good stuff from Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. I did not have the guts to ask him if said shoulder issue requires a masseuse on staff. We'll wind down a Wednesday next on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Wednesday, Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Get the podcast downloaded for you. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the entire show with the segments you want to hear. And check us out. Subscribe to the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Give us a follow on Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Big thanks to all of you who've called and checked in on the stream. We'll do it again tomorrow. We'll check in with Brandon Vogel, Counter Reed, Daddy Burke, our Vegas man. We'll talk some NFL and college football weekend picks. And then Coach Gary Barnett, his thoughts on Nebraska, Wisconsin, Coach Prime, and the coaching carousel. What's your feel here with A&M and Urban? You heard Urban and Sparty, maybe not so much anymore. You've got Traylor, who's just been great at University of Texas San Antonio. I don't know if that's a big enough name, although he's a damn good coach for A&M. I'd let me see Urban and A&M, because they've recruited incredible talent. They've just sucked. I mean, they've not lived up to expectations. Or are you bored with the A&M saga already?
They have the talent that I think could interest Urban, but does he truly have the drive to get back into college football? That's the question for me. Going and being a TV analyst is much easier than being a college football coach, and you get the dollar. Dude, he's used that TV opportunity to help build back up his public image.
Sure, and a documentary that gave you 30 seconds of all these things happened at the University of Florida.
And that's what I think Urban cares more about right now than coaching a football team.
I think he wants to get back in. He wants one more title, and he doesn't like how things finished out at Ohio State, and the SEC is familiar with him. He recruited Texas well, at least when it came to getting quarterbacks and some skill guys. So, no, plus they'd worship him and pay him a boatload of money. They've got it.
I think the names...
He's kind of who they need. I mean, he wanted the USC job, and USC told him to go keep on walking.
How about Dabo Swinney to Texas A&M? That one makes some sense to me.
It does. I think he's ready
as well. Dan Lanning makes sense to me as well, but I don't think Oregon's ever going to let him go.
No, he's in too good a spot. Oregon's lost...
It'll come down to
their
dollars
last
and cents.
Several coaches, if you think about it.
If they go after Dan Lanning, it comes down to dollars and cents, and I don't think with Oregon moving off to the Big Ten next year that they're going to let Dan Lanning go, unless it is just
Oregon
an astronomical offer.
Oregon can't. I don't know. You tell me this. I mean, who wins in this tug of war? Texas oil money or Nike, Uncle Phil? I think oil money wins, doesn't it?
What about Jay Norvell? Not Norvell. Who's Florida State's coach right now?
Norvell.
Yeah.
Not Jay. Jay's at Colorado State.
Mike Norvell. That's why I knew it was wrong.
Well, I just don't know if guys are ready to get out. I know that they're grumpy about the ACC, and Florida State and Clemson are sick and tired of not getting paid for their worth. They want their commission to be a little higher since they're the ones pushing for the playoff. No, if I'm A&M, I'd go do it. I mean, you want to become elite, you want to become relevant, go get Urban down there. He might freak out with the yell leaders. Bunch of guys waving towels, a graveyard dedicated to Lassie the dog. It's an interesting spot down there in Psychoville where Finkel's the mayor.
The one big selling point they have is all the 5 stars that Jimbo brought in there. Urban would just have to develop.
Well, he'd yell and they'd do it, or he'd run them out. Back tomorrow, 4 o'clock. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for tuning in to Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.